I just finished The Crossing by Cormac McCarthy, and I wanted to share some thoughts about this novel. First of all, it's a absolutely magnificent, wonderful novel. It's a 5-star book for me. There's no doubt about that. And it's also, I think, a much more accomplished novel than All the Pretty Horses is, despite that I also absolutely adore and love that book. I finished it a few hours ago. I'm in my cabin in the woods, and I have a nice fire going. And ever since I finished it 2 hours ago, I've just been sort of trying to sort my thoughts and my feelings about this novel. And what I wanted to do was to talk about it. I'll keep it free from any major spoilers. So I think you can listen to this even if you plan on reading the book. If you know you're going to read it, I would suggest you just stop listening now and start reading. This video is really more for you if you already read it and want to hear what other people think about it, or if you're somewhat on the fence about whether you should read it or not. What I want to do and what I think is beneficial to try to understand this novel is I'll put it in context of All the Pretty Horses, and I'll talk a bit about the similarities and the differences between those two novels. I think it's unlikely that anyone reads The Crossing as the first McCarthy novel. It's the second novel in the Border trilogy, and for that reason alone, it's unlikely that you pick it up as the first one. I think it's much more likely that you read it after you read All the Pretty Horses. And because All the Pretty Horses is a more simple and straightforward novel, The Crossing sometimes gets referred to as the boring sequel to All the Pretty Horses. And I think that's because there are a lot of people that love All the Pretty Horses that will not necessarily love The Crossing. But if you love Cormac McCarthy, if you like Blood Meridian, if you've read some of his other Tennessee novels or even The Road, I think you will appreciate this book a lot. Let's start with the similarities between All the Pretty Horses and The Crossing. So time and place is largely similar. All the Pretty Horses takes place right after World War II, and The Crossing takes place, or begins, I should say, in the years just before World War II. And it actually covers quite a lot of time, especially towards the end, where it sort of skips ahead in time for a few years. So we covered the war period as well. The place is, again, largely the same. We are in the border territory between Texas and Mexico. And just like in All the Pretty Horses, we have a main protagonist who is a 16-year-old boy, a cowboy, and on the surface you can say similar to John Grady Cole, but that is only on the surface. In All the Pretty Horses, we have John Grady Cole and his side character Lacey Rawlins, and in The Crossing we have Billy Parham as the main protagonist and his younger brother Boyd Parham, who is the secondary character and who we don't follow throughout the novel, but he's with us in the beginning and then a little bit later as well. But there's a large part of the novel where he's not there. Just like John Grady Cole, Billy Parham is, all things cowboy. He is quite skilled, quite perseverant, quite independent for a 16-year-old boy. But he is not the god of all things cowboy as John Grady Cole is. But just keeping to the to the similarities for a start, The Crossing, again, of course, refers to multiple things. On the surface, we have this time not one but 3 crossings into Mexico and back to the United States. And just like in All the Pretty Horses, The The Crossing is a coming-of-age story where the crossing between the US and Mexico symbolizes sort of the journey from childhood into adolescence and adulthood for Billy Parham. But other than that, it is a vastly different novel. It is much more expansive. It feels like it's about 450 pages, I think. So it is bigger than All the Pretty Horses, but it feels like 1,000 pages. It is very packed with just lots of things happening and a lot of thematics. And again, if we go into the differences, All the Pretty Horses is a romantic hero's journey. Young Lady Cole is very much the John Wayne character. He's an idealized hero. He gets into some tricky spots, but he's always man enough to solve the task. He always managed to wriggle himself out of everything that he encounters. That is not the case for Billy Parham. The Crossing is much more a tragedy. Bad things happen to Billy Parham and the people around him. Even though that Billy Parham, just like Young Lady Cole, has sort of, all the right intentions. He has the same moral character, the same uprightness about him, honesty, hard work, compassion. But Billy Parham is much more of a realistic character that I feel like you can identify yourself with a lot more. Billy Parham, despite being skilled and perseverant and able to withstand suffering and pain, he has his limits. And all throughout The Crossing, as he encounters situations, he has to take choices, and those choices have dire consequences. That's the same for Young Lady Cole. But Young Lady Cole in All the Pretty Horses manages to get out of all these sticky situations. Sure, he breaks a jaw, loses a few teeth, gets shot and stabbed, but he always wins out. Billy Parham's limitations means that the consequences of his actions have some tragic endings. The style of the novel is much more ethereal and mystical and esoteric. It is very descriptive. Again, you can talk about the landscape as being maybe even the main character here. But if we try to break it down, then the beginning of The Crossing is basically a story of a man and a wolf. The setting for it, in the beginning, we get told that Billy Parham's family has moved out of Missouri and into New Mexico. So they're settlers in that area. And they're part of the political campaign from the American government at that time to try to civilize and settle that area of the United States. And so, in a way, their very presence in that land is a defiance of the natural elements that was in their territory. When they settle in that land, they do so to raise cattle. And in order for that to be safe, they also need to get rid of some wild animals. So there are hunters and trappers in the area that is basically trying to get rid of wolves and other wild animals that are a threat to the cattle. And this is where the novel starts. And Billy Parham manages to trap a she-wolf on the territory that's been killing some of his family's cattle. And when he finds that she-wolf trapped in one of his traps, he's supposed to shoot it, or supposed to go and get his father. But we have already seen in a dream in the beginning that Billy Parham sort of identifies himself with this magnificent creature of the wolf, and the wolf represents a wildness and a borderless, boundaryless existence that is true to the natural world and in defiance of the civilized, orderly society that Billy Parham's family represent. So Billy Parham takes it upon himself, for no apparent reason, to take this wolf and ride back to Mexico with it and set it free in the mountains there. That is not an easy task because the wolf is wild. So Billy goes to great lengths in order to try to tame this wolf. And there's lots of beautiful language throughout that part of the novel. It is just exquisite. It is incredibly poetic, the prose that McCarthy uses, but at the same time it's very, very precise, meaning that the imagery is just very vivid, and it's just a treat to read. Needless to say, his endeavors to return the wolf to Mexico and his attempt to tame that which cannot be tamed does not end well. And so eventually he wanders around in Mexico. He is lost. He decides to go back to the States. He finds that bad things has also happened there, and he has to search for his brother. What else can I say without spoiling too many things here? What follows from there on is sort of more journeys into Mexico and more tragedy. And Billy Parham is just very unfortunate. I won't go more into the specific plot because I think it will be difficult to talk about it in any meaningful way that will not spoil things. But what I also wanted to touch upon is some of these thematics in the book. So as I already mentioned, there is some thematic here about the natural world versus the civilized world that is present in a lot of McCarthy novels, and that is something that he's grappling a lot with. What is the nature of human existence, and how do we intertwine with the natural world, and what is best? Is it morally right to civilize and tame both the territories, the landscapes, and the cultures and the people that we encounter along the way, or the Americans encountered during this whole westward expansion? And one of the cornerstones of all of this is told through 4 monologues. And I think those 4 monologues are really the cornerstone of what this novel is all about. It's divided into 4 parts, and in each part, Billy encounters some characters that sort of go on and tell this very tragic tale of suffering and pain and loss of faith. And in each of those stories sort of impacts Billy Parham in some way and shapes his beliefs and his view on the world and his view on himself. And I think this is mostly apparent in the monologue that is told by the Mennonite, this sort of Amish person, and also in the tale that's told by the blind man. And that tale by the blind man, by the way, the story of how he loses his eyesight is just gruesome. And the person responsible for removing his eyesight, when I read that, I was like, Judge Holden, are you there? Is this you? Because there is some serious Judge Holden type of vibe going on with that particular person. But he is only present in that 1 or 2 paragraphs when the blind man retells how he lost the eyesight when he was a prisoner of war. All of those tales of tragedy has this overall thematics of questioning whether there is a God, or if there is, what is the nature of God. And this also seems to be something that McCarthy is grappling with a lot. And McCarthy tends to pitch these two opposing ideas, or pitch this overall sort of hypothesis that if there is a God, then it should be clear to everyone that he is not a benevolent God. He is a God that at best is indifferent to the suffering of humans. But if we do not believe that there is a God, then we suffer the nihilistic entrapment of not having any meaning at all. So these tales of tragedy and suffering and pain and loss and death sort of all recount us this hypothesis that it is better to believe in a cruel God than to have to realize or have to believe that there is no God at all, and therefore there is no meaning in any of the suffering or any of the pain that we endure. On all these four monologues are told very sort of profound and filled with meaning and symbols, and we have some of the same things we see in Blood Meridian. We have some churches that are falling apart and some ex-priests and all that sort of good stuff that McCarthy uses to enhance his narrative. Yeah. What else did I note down here I wanted to touch upon? Yeah, the language, it's incredibly expansive and descriptive, and it's very sensory. Like McCarthy gives you the image of what happens before he gives you the action of what actually happens. And then it's just a big tragedy. Billy unfortunately fails at almost everything that he intends to do, and in that failing, he shows himself as being truly human, with all the limitations that entails. And that's where he differs from Junk Lady Cole, and that's where he is just all the more realistic. And also I think that's why you end up as the reader sympathizing a lot more with him. We all want to be Junk Lady Cole, but we are probably more like Billy Parham, if we are being honest with ourselves. The pace is slow. Things are, very descriptive. The dialogue is similar to in All the Pretty Horses, so very Hemingway-esque. But there's all these dreamy, ethereal, ghostly sort of descriptions of landscape and things that happen. So it's a very ethereal experience of reading it. At the same time, it also has all these deeper thematics that McCarthy sort of outlines for us in the text and asks us as readers to grapple with. And that's why I think it's essentially a very contemplative novel that makes you really think about the suffering of existence and what it all might mean, and forces us to realize that even though we have good intentions, and even though we want all the right things to happen, and even though we take all the right decisions, sometimes we don't know what those decisions are and whether they are right or wrong. And even if they are right, bad things might still happen to us, and we're going to have to suffer the consequences. So it's a very somber, melancholic novel to read in that regard. But it is extremely profound, and I think it's a beautiful novel, and one that you will read a lot slower than All the Pretty Horses. But it also has many more layers of meaning and depth to it. So, yeah, I think that's more or less what I wanted to cover. Hopefully, I was able to convey my thoughts in a somewhat coherent way. If you liked All Pretty Horses, by all means go ahead and read The Crossing, but be prepared that this is a completely different animal, so to speak. Okay, that's it for me now here in my cabin. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for listening.